Welcome to the House of Brand, where we help unleash the true potential of your brand. If you're a business owner, leader, or C-suite executive and you're ready to scale your business to new heights, you're in the right place. I'm Torey your guide in turning your brand into a strategic advantage for your company. In each episode, we get straight to the heart of what it takes to build a brand that drives growth, that shapes culture, and fuels your marketing efforts. So let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of House of Brand. Today I'm here with Aaron. Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell people a little bit about yourself.
Oh man,
Was that question caught you off guard already?
That's the one I wasn't ready for. My name is Aaron, and I am a brand strategist and director of video at BrandCraft. I think my passion and how I got into all this in general is just I'm just very passionate about storytelling. So I did a lot of script writing. That was really my gateway drug into video, which is what brought me to BrandCraft. And then from there, turned that writing outwardly into brand writing, into writing for web content and brand content, things like that. It's just really storytelling is my expertise.
Yeah, that path for you is really cool, I think, because it went through this thing where we needed videographers, basically. We were advertising, you show up, and we're like, that's interesting. Like, he talks about the story and the script more than he talks about really the camera or the... And so there was, something definitely unique about you, I think, when you came on board with our agency. But then since then, it was this idea that, hey, like, Aaron's skill with telling story just really resonates very well on the brand side. Like, those two things are connected very tightly. In fact, remember in the early stages, I kept saying, hey, quit trying to get to the end.
Yeah.
Because you were already coming up with, like, campaign slogans and ideas, and I didn't think that was bad. I thought it was great, but I was like, let's get the client prepared to do some of the hard work up front, which is making tough decisions. But you quickly understood that process and still held on to a lot of those thoughts. I mean, maybe tried to guide them. Like, I wonder if maybe they can still bubble out, but first we have to accomplish this other part.
Yeah, I think it's because of that idea. Most of the time, my career path has been in advertising, and so usually the brand is kind of established at that point by the time I've taken it. And so I am getting to that end point, right? I've got an established brand. We've got that foundation laid. And even on the video side here, working for you guys, I think I've always been very brand conscious of how do I give this brand's message, this brand's voice? How do I bring it out to the world?
Yeah.
And so my brain just jumps to that end. And so I did have to that was my learning curve on the brand side that I learned. And I feel like I hopefully caught on quickly, but I had to jump in and learn, like, wow, you really start very bare bones, which is stuff we've talked about in the past, brand positioning, brand, positioning exercises, reasons to believe, pillars, things like that I had never really worked on before. So I took an understanding of that. Yeah,
no, I think you picked up really fast. In fact, I think at the point we are right now, I think you and I often talk about things like, I wonder if we could do it better this way or that way, or I wonder if we all have different moments maybe in a positioning exercise too, and we're trying to really push a client in our different role and how we do that and how we get that information. With that, that'll lead me into today, which I think is going to be a fun conversation in a different way than a lot of brand conversations are, because there's a bit of a different slant to it. We have, maybe it's because I don't know what our appeal is to professional service corporations to start with. Now part of the appeal is that we've done quite a few, so I think they look at us and go, oh, you guys have done work for attorneys and accounting firms, financial services, like good on the list. So when we say professional services, we're talking about that: accounting, advertising, consulting. As I'm looking on the internet, there's also even logistics. We've done a logistics company. So those types of companies are where we kind of thrive. We really can help them out, and we can walk them through. And it's tough. And the great part I think about that is because it's really tough to brand a professional services company. So that's the subject of today. Is like, why is that? Why is it tough to brand a professional services company? And I'm certain there's times that both you and I have thought, man, I'd love somebody just to walk in with a great product that we can work on brand on, because that would be so much easier than trying to dig out this stuff from a professional services brand. So let's get started on that. And maybe I'll just ask you for your thoughts of, as we open this discussion, what is kind of that big idea and why it's so difficult? Like, what is it about professional services?
I mean, in contrast to like a product or like what you're talking about as a product, I think a product comes immediately with some sort of differentiation that's already right there, whether it's just a simple design. Like this one just looks different than someone else's. There's differentiation there. You can easily say maybe it's an iPhone, for example, it has a different software, whatever, than like that. So it's just really easy to find out this is what's unique about yours. Whereas products or services, and I even think sometimes a lot of these agencies that specialize in a specific, like we only do law offices, I think to me that's even more of a struggle. I wonder how many of them are just recycling the same old differentiator over and over again.
Right.
Because and we do, as we've done this, we have multiple clients in different service-based industries. They all say the same thing to start.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really hard to get there. Whereas like with a product, if we say what makes your widget different than someone else's, they can say, oh, well, ours has a round top or whatever, which does this. It's just really simple because they obviously created a product for that reason. When you create a product, for the most part, you're doing it because of a differentiator. You have a reason that you wanted to make yours.
Yes.
And service-based people are doing it because of a solution they're trying to offer.
Yeah, so the worst part about that is, you're right. When I say, oh, I've got this idea for a new product, you're actually already thinking in a different space. How am I going to be unique? How am I going to be different? And why is this product? And I can explain it to you when I show you the product. And some of, everyone's probably shared an idea they had for a product.
Yep.
A family member, and someone said, well, that's stupid. You could just do this or that. And that's how you're testing this idea of if it's different or not. Professional service companies, man, when we start working with them, a lot of them, their biggest thing they're trying to accomplish is to be just like everybody else. Hey, make sure that we don't say anything that makes us seem different than this other accounting firm over here that's doing a lot of work. Or in financial services, we're going to say this so people know that we're great at investing.
Right.
And they end up with so many of these what we call table stakes. You're saying the same thing. You're trying to be the same thing. And so our part of what we have to do, and then now we'll move the discussion to this, is how our process. Well, actually, you discuss our process of this, like even before we get in positioning exercise, but then mainly when we get in there, how do we walk these clients through that and introduce this idea that we can't just be what every other professional service firm is, but also balance that with they are in some ways. There's a lot of similarities. Yeah,
I think saying that we're going to start before even our process or before even our positioning exercise is important because it does start with a lot of research that we put into it. It's a specialized questionnaire that goes out to everyone, leadership, and all the people on the team. I think that's a really important part of it because we do have to sort of get a lot of history because a lot of times there's answers in that history that even the founders may not know. Because I think there are similarities in some degree to like whether it's a product or whether it's a service.
Yeah.
When you started, there was something that made you want to start this company, right? There's something that you said as a founder that said, I think I can do this better, I can do this different. And there's something in there. And they might not even have defined it. That's our job to figure out and define it and pull it out. But if we ask the right questions, I think we can get that.
Yeah, and I think that typically when a client comes to us, it's rebrand. It's not always we're not launching this new law firm. It's rebrand time. And they've had success. So typically they're in the millions of dollars of revenue. They're doing great. And then we have to figure out why did they do great?
Yeah.
When they founded this company, why did people quickly start hiring them to do work? And that brings me into the thought of typically in professional services, it is really hard. So if I go to a website for a product, I might get a statement generally about what it is or what they do and how it's different. But I'm going to quickly get maybe a feature list or a photo where it paints it very clearly for me that, I get why. In shoes, there's a new brand of shoes that has a 3-letter name. And all of their soles are named Cloud something, right? And if you guys know the brand, you'll know what I'm talking about. They have a very clear differentiator. It's the sole, it's the spring, it's the Cloud, they call it, which is that really that much different than Air? Is it really that much different than, it's not, but they just made it something different. And you've heard this example from me over and over. I use the burger example, right?
Yeah.
And it's this idea that in professional services, and I use the example of a burger because most everybody's had one or has their favorite, is a hamburger is a hamburger.
Right.
But man, you can make some differences and differentiators by being unique in your own way. And if not unique, you're just slightly distinct. That might be the type of pickles you use or whether it's just mustard or all your sauce, whatever that is. There's so many different ways to build that burger. that your different way that you cook that burger or whatever is going to give you this unique position in the market,
Right.
and people gravitate towards that. When you walk into a burger joint, do you order that much different at the joints? No. You really just walk in, you tell them what you want, they put it in a bag, you take it to your seat, or you take it home and you eat it. So we don't talk about, hey, convenient, you can like order through drive-through.
Right.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's like expected. Of course.
The services
Yeah.
are expected. Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so hard. That's a
Yeah.
good point. That's why it's so hard in the service space, because everyone wants to say, well, what makes us different is our great service. And it's like, you're a service-based industry.
Yeah.
If your service was sucked, you shouldn't be in the industry.
Right.
You're in the wrong, so yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, or
And-
hey, we're CPAs in the accounting space. I'm like, I just expect that to be the case.
Right.
Like, are there people out there that aren't? And maybe there are bookkeepers or something like that. But sometimes you're too in your head, and you're thinking the differentiators are that we're professional, and it's like you're right. That's table stakes, as
Yeah.
we call it.
Yeah, I also think we talk a lot about like just where our companies are, talk about like a pivotal moment or in a phase 2 or a new phase of a business. I think also the difference between a product and a service-based industry is that they're more likely going to be in that phase 2. If someone came to us with a brand new product, for example, it isn't tested the same way.
Right.
So they have to have a differentiator to lean on. And I think sometimes people think because, well, we have this history, we don't have to have a differentiator. But once you get to that point to where you're going for new clients and new audiences, you do have to have a differentiator. You almost have to find a way to, I don't want to say productize, but you do. In some degree, you have to think about your service and your business as more of a product. And that's what I think we're looking for, is what is that way to look at this and say, how can we make this really simple for the consumer? How can we make this a simple decision? If they look at it and go, well, these guys have this product in what they do, and this backs up and proves that they're better, that's a reason I should go with them.
Yeah, the startup phase, I think, to make a baseball reference, it's kind of like you've got an 0-0 count. Like, there's a lot of swings you can take at this point. Like, you can go for the fences a couple times, you can just try and, whatever. And I think when professional service comes in through our doors and we have to work on a rebrand, we're at like a 2-2 count. Like, you take the wrong swing,
That's right.
and all of a sudden we're out. And it's like, man, there's such a tight line that we have to weave because the company's had success already. There's risk on all sides of a rebrand when it comes to that. So we have to both be bold in having them reach new areas of understanding why they're distinct. We have to help them through that process and also do it in a way that allows the rebrand to still provide stability as well as growth.
Yeah, because oftentimes there's a lot of, like, even with products, when you're launching a new product, brand new product, you're kind of, you have a little bit of the advantage of we can find our audience. We'll figure out this is made for these people, we're only going to market to these people. And even if it doesn't, you'll find out who it resonates with, and that becomes your target. These people have an existing audience that you don't want to let go of necessarily because they've had success with them for a reason. So instead, we're saying, how do we get more people like them? Or if you want to expand and position yourself a different way and say, we're going to get a new audience. It's just challenging because either way, for the most part, in a service-based industry, you're probably not saying we don't want to work with these people anymore. There may be a reason that you might want to work. Maybe you've moved into a different higher-end clientele, for example. You've reached a different level of expertise. But for the most part, you don't want to necessarily we're not nixing people's history for the most part. We want to try to hold on to that to some degree.
I would say this, though, that one of the things that we have learned through working with companies like this on rebrands is that they actually do have a core audience and an ideal client. And they know they do, and they're very afraid to say that. They're very afraid to say, you know what, we really do great when we work with farms, and especially large farms that, have whatever. Let's say it's an accounting firm, and that's what they do. Well, they say, well, if we say that, that means that we're not going to be able to work with our attorneys anymore, or our whatever, our local restaurants. We like to work with restaurants too. And we always like to tell them, like, that's not the case. It's just that you really have to message to your ideal client. Because if you could, all of us would have more of our ideal client and less of the clients that are not ideal. A client that's not ideal doesn't mean they're bad, though. A client that's not ideal just means, yeah, well, sometimes, like, we don't make as much money off that client for whatever reason.
Right.
But it's not all about money. Sometimes a client that's not ideal might be because we don't have the expertise maybe in-house to understand their business model.
Yep.
Like, maybe some of our accountants, their family's been farmers their whole life, and we know how to deal with the farm category, and we have a lot of confidence when we work in that category to advise them. But yet when we get some of these others, we don't have that confidence, and so we don't go with it. Our job is to tell them that's okay.
Right.
That ideal client is perfect for you. Let's change our messaging. Let's change our position in the market to say that that's who we are, and that's who we serve. And we're not always successful with that, but I think if we can get them to lean in that direction while also trying to save some of their current client base, that's when I think we really hit actually the home run, is when we can get them to change that messaging so that they can, address their core audience and position themselves better by saying something that really resonates to that ideal client.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with saying goodbye to some level of like different clients, if that's what you want to say, if that's what you want to do and that's a goal. What you don't want to do is flatline, say we're going to lose everybody and then we're going to hope we're going to bring this whole new audience.
Yeah,
we have no time tested, we have no expertise, we can't even prove it.
Right.
That's something we have to, that's where the strategy side is more than brand for us, I think, is when we have to look and say like, look, this is actually business suicide for you. A new owner might run into this. You might come in and go, look, I'm throwing everything out the window. We're going for a whole new. It's like, well, that's not proven, and what you could end up doing is closing your doors.
Right.
So we have to give a lot of advice that sometimes it's more than just messaging. It's just, have you thought about the consequences of if this doesn't work? Because there's always that possibility.
Yeah, and one thing I like to talk, because we sometimes dig so deep into a client's business, and our strategic positioning when we're working on that almost feels like we're defining the company that they're going to be or that they are, and they start to see it more as an executive workshop. And then when we say, okay, we're going to say that, they kind of get scared and they freak out a little bit because they're like, oh, well, yeah, so now we're just going to lose all those other clients. Or we're going to do this. So like, you guys, we're talking about marketing here. Marketing, which means we're trying to attract people to your business and bring them into your brand. So we're trying to get you to hire more of your ideal client, but there's nothing in what we're saying that says all of a sudden all of your clients are going to go read your new messaging and just jet out and say, well, we're out.
Exactly.
They have relationships in your company, and that's not going to be the case, and certainly isn't what we want. What we want is for the clients that we're going to help you get after this rebrand, when we go activate, when we go advertise, the clients that we want to help you get are your ideal client. We don't want to help you go get just whatever client. That's how you got to where you're at, is just to serve anybody possible.
It's also important why we say like a brand should be who you are, not who you hope to be or who you wish you were or whatever else it is. Because I think a lot of people try to rebrand for like, well, we wish we were this and wish we were that. But then when they show up and these clients, maybe we do get your ideal client comes in, they find out you're not even actually what they wanted. They're just going to leave too. So now you may have alienated some other client base because you're trying to be someone you're not. Your clients that you have a relationship with, and then your new clients aren't satisfied because you're not who you're saying you are either. So that's why it's important that our process is always about, and our approach to brand that I like so much is that we always talk about it's the DNA of your company. It's who you really are. We're not coming in and saying we're not going to invent or make up who you are. We're going to make sure that we're representing who you really are so that the people who are already your clients and who love you will continue to love you. But we're going to talk about you in a way that lets other people know who also will love you too, that when they show up, they're going to love you as well.
Yeah, I think letting them be themselves and having them understand why being themselves is good enough, and that they will find the right people, that you'll find your right client because you're good enough and what you do is actually what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And they're shocked. And I love using the dating
feels
analogy
like a psychology.
Here.
You are enough.
Yeah, I'm not kidding that in some ways sometimes I feel like we are like, what do you call people that help people date? But I don't know if they're a dating advisor.
Oh, right,
or
like a matchmaker.
Kind of a matchmaker.
Yeah.
Is that we're there telling them, no, you just as you are is good enough. Like, and they're like, no, we got to be this or we got to be that, or let's say all these things. And you're like, you're trying to be something that you're not.
Right.
Though.
Yeah.
Don't try and be something that you're not. Just be you. And there's plenty of people out there that want what you have to offer. You've proven that already because you actually have lived it, and now you're at this multi-million-dollar company. But it's still surprising, even at those companies that have had some success, and you're right, may have been our definition of stage 2, that they don't always have that confidence, though. They don't always know how they got there.
Yeah.
They're confused in some ways. They're like, I don't know. And then you realize, okay, it hasn't been, maybe the way that they get there is this. It hasn't been about that we work for farms or we work for restaurants. That's not how they ever thought about it. How they thought about it was we build relationships. We keep those relationships. We have great customer service. We're very transparent in what we offer. So I'm just describing a general professional services firm. And then we start to dig, and then we let them just keep talking. And eventually they say something where you're like, wow, that seems really different. Is that different in your industry? And then they kind of scratch their head. And they're like, well, I don't know. We don't think it is. We think that's just what we do.
Yeah.
And so that part is, I think, super fun when we get to work with a company and we say, that's different. That's not what other people do. And they start to see it and then embrace it. We have an example that we use all the time.
Yeah.
Where this client told us, something over lunch after we'd already tried to get all this information out of them that just kind of like it sent the little red alarm started going around like, man, that was an important thing that you just dropped on us over lunch. And it just goes to show that the client isn't always aware of their differentiator, and they're not aware why they're good enough.
Yeah, I think it's funny enough that it's kind of a good thing they don't think they're good enough, because to some degree they might not. If it wasn't for them trying to prove it to us sometimes, I don't know if we'd get it, because that is what we're really asking for. You're right. That is the definition of a service-based, the table stake stuff. Well, we have great relationships and we care and we don't. And it's just like, well, that's fine, but can't anybody say that? And when they start going I know, but we really do, and they start giving you examples of things they've done and initiatives they've taken in the company to make sure that they can do this, so that they can replicate it and do it over and over again. And that's when all of a sudden you go well, see, that's different.
It is.
Even if other people have taken actions to try to accomplish the same thing, you did it your way, and there's something distinct about the way you did it that we can, if we dig deep enough, we can find a way to market that and say that is a differentiator for you.
Yeah, and the reason we do it, I think the advantage that we have in these positioning exercises is that we know where we're going, and they don't always know where we're going. Is that we know at some point we have to go out in the market and say something to the consumer that is different than what everybody else is saying. And our client doesn't always know that this is the start of that, where we're trying to figure out what we're going to say that's different. And for us to go out there to say, this is XY Service Corporation. They've been family owned for the last 50 years. They've got great service. They can be trusted, and they have the highest level of integrity. And you look at all of those things and you say, you've said nothing that helps you make a decision about whether I want to work with you or not. Now, some of those things may matter pretty low in the decision-making process. Like, let's say that there's two firms you're looking at, and when you get to the end, you're the consumer. When you get to the end, you're like, okay, well, I like them both. But one of them has this and one of them has that. That's kind of the lower level. Like you'd say, well, they've been around in the community for 50 years. I'm just going to go with them, right?
Yeah, but they're only going to get that low if that top level message is good enough to get them there.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Is because clients have asked us, well, it matters, doesn't it, that we're locally owned and that we've been a while? I said, it matters. Sure. It's just at a decision-making phase that's way down the line, and it may skew one way or the other. But no, not all the time. Let's just talk about that, like being around for a long time or being family-owned. There are certain situations I can think of where a person might think, I don't want to deal with a family-owned company like the way that you're describing it. I don't want to deal with somebody that's been around for 50 years. I'm looking for somebody more innovative.
Yeah.
And I don't want to deal with a family-owned business. The last family-owned business I dealt with, the dad was fighting with the son, and neither one of them could make, you know what I'm saying? It's like, there could be reasons why people look at that and make a decision that, I don't really want that. I'm stretching probably a bit when I say that.
Maybe a little bit on that specific instance, yeah. But I mean, I think there is some degree of because I don't think it's necessarily even a bad position to say, like, look, we've been doing things the same way, however many 50 years. That isn't a bad thing if you're okay with going, we want clients who care about that. And you are positioning to say that's our ideal clients, people who want to do things the old-fashioned way or whatever else it is.
Yeah.
But the downside is you have to be willing to say, well, that means you're going to lose out on a lot of these clients who go, well, I want someone who's revolutionary and who's brand new and who has a fresh perspective or whatever the thing is, right?
This is I have a great example of this, and I don't want to say a brand. I just want to see if maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a local bank.
Okay.
That's named after a crop, I will say that. And they, Cropland Bank. And they do an advertising campaign where they talk about the fact that they know nothing about crypto. They have no idea and they go after all these new investment things. And they basically say, we're old school, we serve farmers, and we protect your wealth.
I think that's great.
And I was like listening to it like, well, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
They're basically talking about the fact that do you have to be super innovative and the latest technology and the latest investment to serve people? No, because there's a customer for that.
Right.
There's somebody that wants that. And you can imagine, I'm just imagining my grandpa sitting in his chair in his living room, having been a farmer his whole life. I don't know what the hell, this crypto stuff is. I have no interest. And all of a sudden this bank comes and says, we don't care either. And he's like, that's who I want.
That's who I want. Exactly.
That's who I want.
Those
right
guys
there.
get me.
Those guys get me.
Yep.
And they're going to maybe have to, well, I don't know. I don't know if they'll have to figure out, but they've got a buyer for at least 20 years, in that category that fits that. It's not a big risk. And they know exactly who they are. I thought it was just a great campaign. Yeah. I would really love to read maybe some of their brand work or some of their positioning work on how they ended up there, or did they just nail a great campaign? To me, that message sounds like it's something probably a little bit deeper. It's kind of the new mantra that they have of this is who we serve. And
Yeah, I think that's good. There's actually other, because that branches out so far too, right? For them, if they just go like, look, this is new, this is untested, this is whatever, like that speaks to trustworthiness for that client base too. It's like, because I could see, like you said, your grandpa or whoever who would say, I don't know anything about this crypto. I don't know if I trust it. I don't know if I want my money in that. Well, then now you don't have to worry about it. These guys aren't going to put your money somewhere that you don't understand. If you come back and say, where are my investments? They're not going to say, oh, it's googly gop. They don't, you know what I mean? Some word they don't even know what it means. Like, we're old school that way. And that makes you feel secure. It makes you feel heard. It makes you feel like your money's in a good place.
Very much. And then, I guess take that and compare that to the Silicon Valley entrepreneur that maybe is getting ready for exit or doing something like that, and they're looking for an investment firm or a bank. Absolutely is not what they're looking for, is that bank that says, oh, we don't know anything about crypto or this. Right. That person's looking probably for something a little bit more innovative and maybe a bigger return, and maybe there's other criteria for them. And they'll go out and search for that bank and find it, and that'll be the one that they choose, bank or investment firm, whatever it might be. All right, great. This conversation's been great. I know that there might be somebody tuning in that actually has a professional services corporation. One thing I'd like to talk to them about is how do you get through maybe one of these brand exercises, or how do I brand myself and get ready to message this in this very unique way so that we can brand. So we go through some research, and we don't have time to go through all this in detail, right, Aaron?
Right.
But we have a set of questions that we ask a client, and a lot of that involves, hey, kind of tell us your backstory, tell us what you do, tell us how you got here. We have an animal question that always brings about a lot of very interesting responses, and it's a ton of fun. But from that, we take that and we go into the positioning exercise and then tell people like what goes on there. Like, what do we do to try and get to the next stage, which is actually putting pen to paper and start writing some of their brand promise, unique value, pillars, and positioning statement. Yeah,
so our main goal in the positioning exercise is to walk away with hopefully a positioning statement. We can walk away and say, look, this is who your company is, this is who your company serves, this is the three ways that, or this is the unique value that you offer to them, and these are the three ways that you can back that up and prove that you offer that value.
Yeah.
That's our main goal. How we do that is it really is based on, it starts with, like you said, the questionnaire, and then we'll kind of go through that same questionnaire, and we're going to challenge you on some of the things you said, because most of the time in the questionnaire, there's some good nuggets. There's always some good nuggets in there, but usually there's a lot of table stakes, and we have to challenge you and say, well, prove this to me, And so that's what the positioning statement, that positioning exercise looks like for the most part, is us really going through step by step the questions that we thought we want more information on, that we want to dig deeper on, that we want you to have to back up. And that helps us define and create a positioning statement. After that, we break away usually, and really quickly, while it's still fresh and top of our minds, we start just talking about everything that we learned. And we usually find a direction, I want to say usually within a couple hours after that positioning exercise, that then we start working into as some positioning statement that we'll show to the client, that we'll deliver, as well as obviously some pillars and some reasons to believe. And then all those things turn into a brand promise. And the brand promise is, this is a consumer-facing version, more or less, of your unique value proposition. We're going to tell you, this is what we guarantee as a brand. Our promise to you is we're always going to deliver on this. This is what you're always going to get out of our service. And that's usually the initial phase of presentation. At that point, once we get sign-off from there, from the client, that's when we'll typically, from that point, move into all the other messaging that goes along with it, that reinforces it, and then that also gets into design, where we start saying, well, how can we bring this to life in a way that looks, that reinforces that with look, whether it's color, whether it's a shape, or whatever it is that we say, we want to reinforce this and make sure that it all tells the same story and tells the same message.
Yeah, at that stage, after we do positioning exercise and we write that, it's really the foundation that we write, which is like you said, that unique value, the positioning statement, the brand promise. Most often that then allows us to write a good tagline that it typically aligns with the brand promise pretty strongly. All of that is a lens, though, to write content that might be used in marketing. And so the next phase, why choose us, is what we decided to call it. It's gone through a lot of different names, but ultimately said, hey, like, what are we trying to write here? And I think you're the one that came up with it. You're like, well, it's really just why choose us. That's what we're writing.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it is. It is why choose us. So we call it that now, and we write a statement that is a letter to the consumer about why you should choose us, their benefits, their reasons, why they're going to be happier, more fulfilled, whatever it is, if they choose this company. I love that part of the exercise. I think it's great. It's also probably the most difficult, and the ones that we probably have more back and forth on is how to get through that in a way that that is easy to understand and succinct.
Well, because it recaps everything in the brand book.
Yeah.
It basically recaps your pillars, your reasons to believe, your promise, and all that. And it says, I think if we could, like if we talk about doing, sometimes we do training and stuff on a brand book, right? I think to me, if we could walk away and say, look, if you guys just had one page or one section of the brand book to go, I would say this is the set page you memorize. If everyone in your company could say, why choose us, and you're all saying the same reasons, these are why, and you all believe that, and you can all live by those things.
Yeah.
And you walk it through it, I think it's a great sales tool that I think unifies and makes sure that everyone's getting the exact same experience with your brand and with every department in your brand.
Yeah, I agree. It is important, and those easy things to look at and have talking points where people are saying the same thing is so important, and sometimes it's left out. Okay, so at this stage, we have some things written down. We use a note platform for most of this now that we all share, so we're editing kind of the same document. When it gets to this phase, we haven't done any design work at this point. Right. So if this is a rebrand that involves new visuals, we haven't even started. And this is a stage, typically when we get through why choose us, now is when we hand over some notes from our positioning exercise, all of the new messaging, and then we meet with the design team and say, here's what we got. And that's that content first design that we like to rebrand with, which is do the unsexy stuff first. I guess it maybe depends on what kind of person you are. If to you, like words, or you're an author or storyteller, maybe like you, you're like, well, this is the good stuff.
It is, yeah, it's sexy to me, yeah.
Sexy for you. And then the designers say, okay, now we can come in, but they're so much more informed.
Yes.
And there's so much more emotion involved, and they can understand what we're trying to accomplish, and then use that to inform design.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to accomplish. So the steps are, think really hard about what you're going to do. For us, if you hire an agency like us, we're going to walk you right through that whole process and really challenge you and make sure that we come up with something great. Trying to do it on your own, I would say try and challenge yourself.
Yeah, which is hard to do,
but challenge yourself, come up with your own reasons, write them down, get rid of the ones that are table stakes. From there, say, okay, if this is how we're different, how do I write that in a statement? We actually have a separate talk on this. If you go back and look up positioning with House of Brand, we talk about how you can do this. But for the most part, we move into design. We do some sketches of what design could look like. In the end, we put a book together that takes all these words, that blends the visual design into there. So when you look at it, somebody would really understand, I get this brand. I could market them. I could build a website.
Yeah.
I could understand how they operate within their company. It's much deeper than, it's not an identity guide.
Right.
It's not a logo guide. It is a real statement of their business. It's a statement of their future. It's a statement of how they operate, and it could be a imagination of how they look. And when we do it great, the result is almost seamless. How quickly companies can start using it and because we're not saying anything that they don't already believe.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's the great part about it. With that, Aaron, I really appreciate the conversation. This has been fun. I feel like we could almost talk about this with our experiences and go back with clients and almost do a 3-hour podcast just about dealing with professional services.
I think if
firms.
we could censor the names of clients,
I would love that.
Then I think that we probably could talk
as
for
we're talking, I'm sure,
full day. Yeah,
as we're talking, I'm sure you're thinking of some of our past clients, and I want to make sure that we don't bring them up. The other rule that we have in our podcast that I've tried to enforce, and I think we've done it to this point, is that we won't make references to major brands.
Right.
Like Apple, like
Nike.
We've had a couple of, and I think we've noted it when we've done it. Like, man, I don't like to do this, but because I think the idea is, if you're watching, we're trying to help those companies that are not in that category, and I think the conversations are a little bit different, so we try and steer away from that.
Yep.
With that, appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of House of Brand.